welcome back, everyone. It is Friday afternoon out here in Southern California, Friday evening out there on the West Coast or in Europe. And if you are on the other side of the world, it is probably Saturday by now. But wherever you are, it is time for Cinema Crusaders. And as we are wont to do, we are here to take an older movie, take another look at it, break it down, and give you our review of it, and then give you our rating on the movie. Now, what we do like to do is, unfortunately, every now and then, someone passes away out there, and if it's possible, we'd like to take a movie of theirs and give it a review and kind of give an homage to them. As I'm sure you're all aware, Tina Turner recently passed away this week. And so we're looking back at, for me, one of the movies that was huge in my childhood. It was the movie that introduced me to Mad Max, and then I would go on to watch the other movies. I'm talking about Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, and Tina Turner starring in it as Anti-Entity. And she is really, really good in this film. She didn't do a whole lot of movies, but she was incredible in this film, I think. I think she kind of stole the show a little bit, but we're going to get into that, and I want to hear what my other Crusaders think about it, think about her performance. So without further ado, though, I want to introduce those other Crusaders. First of all, I have to give a big shout out to Lance Lucero. He's on a road trip, sending back some beautiful pictures. So drive safe, Lance, coming back. And so I will introduce our first Crusader. He is a writer for Blitz for Revelation Comics. He also writes for Omen Comics. He's also doing a little bit of work for Blood World. He's a incredibly talented English professor. I could tell just by the way he talks. He just exudes grace and charm and eloquence and everything he does. I'm talking about none other than Steve Shadewing Sellers. How you doing, Steve?
Can't we all just get beyond Thunderdome? I figured I had to get that out of the way. It's one of my favorite lines from Mystery Science Theater. Anyway, what more is there to say about Tina Turner? I mean, she was, by her own words, simply the best. Tremendous singer, tremendous artist. And as it turns out, she was a pretty good actress in this and well. And her charisma, I think, very much, takes charge in this movie. So I can't wait to dive into it.
Awesome. So we're going to do that. Well, the next guy I'm going to bring on here, if you pay him enough money, he might be your private dancer. Who knows? He is an artist. He does Symbols of Liberty. He's working currently for doing Blood World. He's also done Mr. Happy. Check out his stuff on DeviantArt. And if you're really into that, hire him to be your private dancer. Dancing for money. Yes, I'm talking about none other than Jeff, Dr. Faye Bracey. How you doing, Jeff?
Oh, sorry. Your time's up. Your time's up. I got something else to do. No, I told you. Limited time. Private dancer. Limited time. Yeah, back. Yeah. Sorry, had to finish up that bit of business. This movie is I know there's a contingent of the fandom who don't really like this movie so much. This is their least favorite of the Mad Max series, but I think it's a rather interesting side quill, if you will. That side mission that Max takes from his normal, gangbusters 140-mile-an-hour chase through the desert. And I like the introspection of it. And as we'll get into it, there are definite outside of the film verse reasons why it sort of took this road. And I look forward to talking about that.
Cool. Before we're gonna focus on Tina Turner for a segment. Before we do that, Mad Max is iconic. I think we're due another movie set in the universe, but centered completely on Furiosa. Is supposed to be coming up fairly soon. But I want to go around the horn and see how you guys rank the Mad Max movies and why, real quick. I will say this in defense of this movie, Beyond Thunderdome. I think that this movie, even more so than number 2, establishes the world, does more world building for the Mad Max universe than anything. And I don't think that you get Mad Max Fury Road without this film.
I'll agree.
Because I think this film set up that concept of the different worlds and the different cities and their specialization. And you see when they come out in the cars to do the car chase scene in the movie, all of that would eventually get bigger and better in Fury Road, I think. So that's my take. For me personally, the way I rank the movies, I'm gonna go. I say Mad Max #2 is my favorite because it really took the franchise in a little bit different direction. Then Fury Road is just that's a movie where you couldn't get up to go to the bathroom for the whole movie. It was just too, it's one of those movies where your kidneys hate you afterwards. Then this movie right here, Beyond Thunderdome. And then, strangely enough, the first one, The Road Warrior, my least favorite in the series is kind of, I hate to say it, it's kind of a little bit boring to me, so there's a whole lot there. So let me go to Steve. I know you've seen 2 of the movies. So how would you rank the movies you've seen?
Yeah, I can't really talk about Mad Max or The Road Warrior. I kind of discovered Mad Max more with this film when I was really young. I did see it like when I was young, but it was one of those that I only kind of remembered certain bits and pieces for like the first half of the film. Like the whole bit where Mad Max is going into Bartertown and he's laying down all these different weapons out on the table. I mean, that kind of stuff stuck with me, but it was just not a series like that I kind of stuck with because I don't think I completely got it at the time. And it was just not one of those things that was on my radar compared to other things I was into. But I did see Fury Road. I really loved that. That one to date is my favorite of the 2 that I've seen. Not because Thunderdome is bad by any stretch. I think it's perfectly fine for the movie that it is. I just enjoyed Fury Road a little bit more. It was bigger and it was had more of that action and had that ensemble cast. And you really does a lot more, with the modern tech that they'd had in 2015, as opposed to, 30 years before that when this was made. So I really do want to see The Road Warrior, though. I keep hearing that one is really great, but I have not. I will have to see that after this.
Yeah, definitely. The first one, it doesn't even. It's pre-apocalypse. So the very first one.
That's one of my big issues with it. It's pre-apocalypse.
So, Jeff, to you, how would you rank the movies and why? So.
2, 4, 3, 1.
Nice.
Same ranking as you. I'm sure for similar reasons. I like the apocalypse setting. I like the post-apocalypse setting for one. I like the level of action in the ones that do have action pieces. Although I also do like the world building that we do see in 3 and 4 that was lacking in 1 and 2. And 1 and 2, are basically just like 2, especially is just kind of a big car chase movie. Whereas 1 sort of sets the ground. 1 is my least favorite because it's pre-apocalypse. All we know is the rest of the world has gone to hell, and Australia is the last holdout. But eventually they've run out of gas, like everybody else. People have got to figure things out. And 1 just feels like a somewhat generic 80s action revenge flick, and I've seen a million of those growing up in the 80s. So it was fun for what it was, but I don't feel like the character of Max really took off till the second one. Although it is interesting because you need that first movie, because the first movie is about Max losing his humanity, becoming the kind of people that he ends up hunting, and that sets up Mad Max 2, where like he's so emotionless and so broken that he has to find a reason to care again, and that's why 2 is so strong. 2 is actually the perfect ending for the Mad Max character, because he does regain his humanity once again. So I was really surprised when we had a Mad Max 3, which is, like I said, a really interesting side quest, if you will, that explores not so much Max. And there were some things that were cut out that would have gotten into Max a little bit deeper that George sort of ended up doing a bit with Fury Road. But I did like seeing the world. It's kind of like when you see Star Wars, you see the main stars like, oh, this is really cool. Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Chewbacca, Han Solo, Princess Leia, all that. And then we get things like, Rogue One, where we get to see more of the world and how things work around that. And that's why I think, even though, as I was telling these guys in the beforehand show, normally if I see a movie where a main character is not the main character in his own movie, Fury Road builds on what they've got so much. That's what makes Fury Road my second pick, because it's just so strong that I don't mind Max being not the star but the ensemble in that film.
I think
especially since Furiosa was such a good character.
Yeah, and all the characters are really, really strong in that movie. All of them are so good, from the villains to the brides Furiosa, Max, everybody, and of course the war boy who's with him. Great writing.
They treated Max with respect as well.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the focus was elsewhere, Max was still a force.
Yeah.
So that's the way to do it. I think Fury Road is kind of
you didn't have to beat Max down to make the women shine in this film.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yep. I will say the last thing I'll say about the first Mad Max movie is that it's really weird because in that one, it's almost like Martin Riggs is there crossed with Cobra, Sylvester Stallone's Cobra. So it really has that feel. So it's almost like this cop, revenge movie, and then with a little bit of Dirty Harry thrown in or something, and then we go straight from that into a whole different animal. But it tracks, it works, and I think it's been better for it as they kept going. And I personally am looking forward to that Furiosa movie. So I want
you guys remind me post show. I've got a great Cobra story to tell you. I just watched a really interesting interview with Brian Thompson, who played the villain in that.
Cool. All right, so let's get to the lady we were. The reason we picked this movie today, Tina Turner, and
the Queen is dead. Long live the Queen.
Yeah, I'm going to go around the horn, opposite directions. I'm going to go to Jeff first, and I'm just going to set you loose. Talk a little bit about your impressions, what you get from Tina Turner's performance in this film.
Now, I think I saw this film before I saw Tommy, which I don't know anything else she's done. I'm aware that she did the movie of the Who rock opera Tommy. There's a brief part as the Acid Queen, and she didn't have to do a lot of extreme acting in there. She just kind of had to, look normal and then look really crazy later on in a scene. But here she got to flex her acting chops, and Tina is like really good. She is a charismatic person, and that comes across on the screen. You believe she has what it takes to rule this town of misfits and outlaws and enforce some sort of society upon them. She has that strength of character, and I buy it. And she looks friggin' amazing in her 100-pound chainmail dress. And she was so committed to doing this. George Miller wrote this with her in mind, but he didn't think he was going to get her. He thought we might have to see if Jane Fonda wants it, but Tina thankfully wanted it. And I'm so glad she was there because she actually committed to shaving part of her head so she could have that wild, almost like kind of faux hawk going into her lion's mane look.
Nice.
So that's why her hairline is so high in there. Like she just went for it. And that's the kind of a commitment you normally see out of like somebody who acts for a living. They're willing to make whatever physical change is required for the role. And she's so committed in it, and she's so strong in it. And Auntie M is Anti-Entity. She's ruthless, but she's so charismatic. Like she's doing this because this is what that she's found works. The world is full of people who are ruthlessly trying to survive. They're all a bunch of cutthroats. She understands that. And so she does ruthless things, but at the same time, you can't help but like her because she is keeping, a functioning civilization might be built off of this at some point. She's creating resources, and she's such a strong, charismatic character. In some ways, she kind of reminds me, even though personality-wise they're different, the strength of character of somebody like a Tywin Lannister, who is an absolute tyrant. But you also know he's right, and survival of the Lannister family is in his hands. And when he's gone, the Lannisters die out basically. And so characters like that are always fascinating to me because they're bad guys, but they're also good guys. And this is a very ambiguous world when it's a dog eat dog world of survival. And Tina is 100% believable in the role.
Awesome, very cool. Steve, what did you think of Tina Turner in this role?
Yeah, I think Jeff has stated it pretty well. I think I will add that part of the reason why we see Tina Turner in the role that we're in, the way that the role is defined, is because George Miller didn't want like a typical villain. He didn't want like a typical bad guy. He wanted a complex character that was a positive force, as he put it. and basically somebody who was the hero of their own story essentially. And I think that that's definitely something that you get with her. We don't get a whole lot about the character's backstory. All we know is that she came from nothing until the apocalypse, and then she scrambled and took whatever she could in the aftermath of that. And you can definitely tell that Tina Turner has the charisma and the force of the personality that she has, and the force of will that you can believe that she built the civilization from nothing, that she started from nothing, and she was able to build all these people together just because she's just that strong. And that's impressive. So she, as an antagonist, she really works. And on top of that, she's also a bit complex because she's not somebody that kills, just because she can. She doesn't enjoy it necessarily. She's just willing to do it because that's how she holds on to power. If you're in her way, she'll ruthlessly destroy you. But if you can be an asset to her, she'll make use of you. And she's not going to, even if you're like a problem to her, she will find a way to make use of you. She won't necessarily kill you. I find that really interesting. She's pragmatic in her villainy, and yet, a lot of this is just her, will to survive, her will to be in control, and just generally her being so charismatic that she compels you to watch everything that she does, and she was just amazing in this role.
Now, Steve, to your point, because you haven't seen the first two films, you make an excellent point there. And George Miller steps away from his previous two villains. The previous two villains, Lord Humongous and his second in command, and Toe Cutter, the leader of the Bat Gang from the first film, they are there to destroy out of selfish reasons. They are just forces of locusts, like either like destructive revelry, as in Toe Cutter, or in Lord Humongous keeps his band together because he's powerful, and he knows like they're like locusts. They just come and take resources, whereas his aid is more like in the vein of Toe Cutter. He just lives to kill. And so this is a really nice change of pace to see like this world does have these kind of anti-antagonists who do serve a purpose in the world.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. The thing I would say about Tina Turner's performance in this film is that George Miller's got some really complex things going on with this character. She is, you think about the acting chops that are required to play this character, and you're like, Tina Turner, for a person that only had one major,
as far as I know, just one credit, and now she's got to carry a big chunk of this movie.
Yeah, and I think you could argue she stole the show. Of this movie.
Yeah,
and
even though she's not in it for a good chunk of the film.
Yeah, and she had to, like, there's various points of the film where she has to change emotions on a dime because Entity is so calculating and conniving, and is always hiding what her motive is, and then will reveal it when it is most advantageous for her. A lesser actor or actress, it would come off very fake, very forced, and it felt very authentic with her. And I think you have to give her credit for that. And we were talking before the film. It's like she had a very small part in Sgt. Pepper's. She had a relatively larger part, but still small part in Tommy, and that's it. And yet she, like we said, carried this film. And then, on top of that, the character of Entity, going to Steve's point, as far as being pragmatic, she is not your classic mustache twirling villain who is out there just to destroy the world and watch the world burn. And this is illustrated at the end of the film where there's no reason to kill Max at that point.
Yeah.
Right.
And so she lets him go.
Yeah.
And there are a variety.
And she clearly respects him. She clearly respects him and his talent and his ability.
Yeah. And you can see the thought process in her face as she's calculating. It's like, is it better for me to kill this guy and send that message to the people who are following me, or to let him live and potentially have an ally, or whatever it is she's thinking? And it's just like, it's so good.
Seems like she decided the world is better with Max in it.
Yeah.
Even if it was against her at that moment.
Yeah. And that's why, even though I rate this movie third in my Mad Max films for a variety of reasons, it's not because the film is bad. It's just, it's a different film, and I like it. And it's
just the others are better. Let's face it.
Yeah. and that is it. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
And I think that, to wrap up on Tina Turner a little bit, it's just it was really incredible. Now, the one critique I will have, and I want to hear what you guys say about this, is that I think that the filmmakers did her a little disservice in that they added in specifically, there's this one scene where this guy is randomly playing saxophone music. And it was almost like the guy was there just because, we have to have some musical component because she's a singer.
Saxophone with Tina Turner in the background somewhere, yeah.
And I was just like, when I first watched
I'm surprised she wasn't playing it.
Yeah. When I first watched the film, I was like, okay, they're doing this to help carry her, make her comfortable. But after I watched the whole movie, I was like, she didn't need that. And it came right out of left field, and it was never brought up again. So.
This is the first and only Mad Max movie that does have pop or rock music in it. And it's because Tina Turner's there. She wrote 2 songs for the movie, both of which are amazing. One of the Living, and of course, just totally vegged on the other song, which is the more famous of the 2.
We Don't Need Another Hero.
Thank you. We Don't Need Another Hero. Yep. So I'm not surprised to see that in there. That the saxophone guy kind of reminds me of that moment in The Lost Boys where you walk by and there's that super buff rocker like Saxon out in the back of the carnival.
I like her opening song for this movie too. I mean, you hear those notes and it's really good.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, it's my one critique. It's not a huge critique, but to me, it just kind of makes me laugh a little bit. Not that I'm saying that I don't want the music in Labyrinth, but it's kind of like, David Bowie's in the movie, we have to have him sing. I mean, you kind of do have to have him sing if he's in the movie.
I mean, to be fair,
just be subtle about it. I guess is the thing.
To be fair, that kind of fits that sort of Feywild goblinoid adventure.
Yeah.
Sure. But I like the idea that they did have musicians in here because that's another way to keep a populace happy. Okay. From being in the military, when you're under stressful situations, like you want a level of food and a level of comfort will keep up people's morale. And music is another way of achieving that. So I think that's kind of a little bit of world building, a little bit of like, we're nodding that Tina Turner's in here, but I like it. I like it in the movie.
She's also very bred in circuses. I think she very much understands that.
Precisely.
We see that with Thunderdome, obviously, but also the whole thing about the wheel. That's a game. Everything is like couched. All of her justice and all this idea is couched in terms of games. Right. And I think it is partly because of that.
We're going to go back to that in a second. One less critique, just another small critique. I hear what you guys are saying, but if we're going to bring in the music and everything else is like cobbled together, did you notice that saxophone looked like it was brand new, bought out of a top of the line music store? It was like that thing was shiny.
If that's
new, so.
Consider this. If that is your livelihood in this world, you are going to maintain that. Just like you would maintain your weapons. You would keep the keenest edge on your blade, and your gun would be oiled and maintained at all times.
Where they get?
She could have been a musician prior to being the Lord of Bartertown.
Yeah, we don't know what she was.
That could have been something she could have kept and maintained.
And it's kind of cool because I wonder if George Miller was thinking about her, if he thought about her for this role, because Tina Turner in real life kind of clawed her way up from nothing, especially when what happened with her and her husband Ike to make something of herself on her own. So I wonder how much of that got into this performance and why, if that's one of the reasons why she's so good.
It would be interesting to know Auntie Inity's backstory because in my own mind, I always made up a backstory for her that she's an American, but she was in Australia working as like a lounge singer or something,
Yeah.
So
a private dancer, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. So you brought up the games, and Jeff was asking about this guy before, and I will get to you first on one of these, Steve, but I'm going to go to Jeff again. We got to talk about another character to me that steals the show, and I know that all of us liked him. I'm not sure what his name is. Jeff, you were calling him the MC.
I'm just calling him the MC because he's always being master of ceremonies before Auntie M begins her pronouncements of her authority. He's the guy who gets the show rolling, and he's another guy who just steals the show every time he's on there. Like there's like all eyes on this dude. I think I might have found the actor who played him.
While you're looking at that real quick, what I will say, and then Steve, I want your response to this comment. is that this movie. Now I know you haven't watched the other two, but one of the things that strikes me about this movie is the first two,
I think I'm wrong.
especially the second one. They're pure action pieces. You know, it's just they set you in the middle of the scenario and go. This movie was much more about building mythology. We're farther out from pre-apocalypse, so the kids are telling their, they're through the telly and looking at the telly at the way back and everything, and then MC is developing this almost religious experience. So, what did you think about that from a writing perspective, from a storytelling perspective, and how did you like that in this movie, both the kids and the MC? So.
I think I bought it more in terms of the kids, and the reason for that is they didn't grow up during the apocalypse. They didn't live through it. Now, when we talk about Tina Turner's character, Auntie Entity, and Max, I mean, clearly they were around for that, so they have clear memories of what happened. So I'm not so. I kind of don't have a problem with the kids having that experience because they don't remember it or they were too young to remember it. And so, they start to invent a mythology around how they got there and all of that. I think that makes total sense, honestly, especially with these little fragments that they have of a world that was. The Viewmaster thing. I mean, a bunch of kids had Viewmasters like that as kids, and
Captain Walker. I had a Viewmaster.
Yeah, Captain Walker. Yeah, all that, and I thought that was really cool, and that kind of made sense to me. I don't really buy the adults being able to do that unless it's intentional, with the intent of like controlling the populace in some way. But I think it's probably too soon for that to really work in Bartertown. But for the kids, I really bought it. Oh yeah, and as a side, since you mentioned like things that you had problems with in the film, I'll just mention one small one, and that is, where are they getting the gas for the chainsaw? Because it's like it only seems to work for the villains. When it's Max using it, it doesn't work. And I'm just like, yeah, where are you getting the gas for that?
I don't know if you've ever had to work a chainsaw. There's a skill to it that I do not possess in abundance, like working in haunted houses and stuff. Like we had a guy who was actually a lumberman, and he could crank them up like that, but everybody else would struggle to get them going.
I have to say, with the adults, I think that's exactly what it was, though. It's this. It was almost like a religious type experience where they've got all the different chants and and they knew all of the proper refrains. So when somebody says one word, that it's almost like this ritual type thing. And it's like, if there's anything that human beings love to do, they love to be part of a ritual and be part of the group. So
yeah, I will add one thing. One thing makes me buy it enough where I'm willing to skate over it, and that is there's clearly a cult of personality around Auntie Entity, and I can buy that because she is that charismatic. She is charismatic enough that I can buy an entire cult running around her.
Well, and I'm going to go to Jeff here in a second, so and you can expand on the MC and talk about the kids as well. But I will also say, we're talking about Auntie Entity and her pragmatism, but her charisma. When the MC is explaining that, arguing gets to fighting and fighting gets to warring and warring leads to what happened, and it's like, and so we have 2 men enter, 1 man leave. You kind of sit there going, you're not wrong. So it's like, what do you think about all that, Jeff?
No, I think you've hit it right on the head. I think this is the new religion, and it's a very functional religion. So if we have a nuclear holocaust, Australia seems to be one of the few places that was left unmolested. And even then, a lot of what we see in Australia seems to be desert. So maybe Australia took a few hits because Australia does have a lot of bush country. So why aren't the people there where all the water is, unless some of that got nuked and became completely unusable?
Yeah.
So
we know that happened. We know that happened because early on, that guy tries to sell Max irradiated water, and then Max puts out the Geiger counter, and he exposes them as a fraud. So there definitely happened.
So there we go. So so they are having to live in the worst climates, the worst areas of Australia that only the Aboriginals know how to survive in, and they're having to figure it out. And if you've lived in that world, if you look at the context of the world, if you're Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever, and the world ends and it doesn't end the way you were always promised it was going to end, would you believe in religion anymore? So they invent the religion of chance, and it works because nobody has faith in anything other than what they can accomplish with their own two hands, what they can hold, what they can use, what they can taste, touch, and smell. So when their religion and their government is all built on chance, it makes 100% sense for the people living there in Bartertown. And it was just a roll of the dice that we survived. Who knows where they were that saved them from the bomb. Like, oh, I just happened to be over here. I wasn't in Melbourne at the time. Melbourne got wiped out. So it all makes sense to me. And I love, like you said, I love the mythology of it. I do think I do wonder what's going to happen to Bartertown, because Entity doesn't seem to have picked a successor yet. I don't really see her grooming anybody. Iron Bar is just her muscle. The MC, is the master of ceremonies, but he doesn't seem to have a true leadership sort of role. So I don't know what her plans are. So that makes me wonder what happens to Bartertown after her. So like I want to have hope and faith that she will achieve and she will build back. And I do like the idea. How many times have we seen, like, when governments just decide to go to war? It's like, I wish we could get you in the ring and you in the ring and you two could settle this, because it doesn't involve us. It has nothing to do with us. So like, it'd be better if like you guys could do that. And it goes back to that medieval setting that we see in movies like Game of Thrones, or the trial by combat. That is a staple of human civilization. And if you're like Master Blaster, you can't fight. You pay somebody to fight for you. So he's got his giant goon. He's got his own mountain to be the fighter for him. And that's still respected for like thousands of years of human history. Now, as for the children, sadly, the children are kind of doomed.
Yeah.
They're a tiny population in an oasis, and they're going to interbreed until they got 3 eyes and 20 arms, and it's not going to go good. So the ones who got out are the ones who are going to make it, unless somebody else finds them out there, and Captain Walker's them out of there somehow, which sucks because I really like those kids, and I love the mythology they built. This film was originally going to be a take on Lord of the Flies George Miller was working on. And his idea is like, well, what if somebody finds this Lord of the Flies setting, and then all of a sudden he got the idea, well, what if it just happened to be Mad Max? And that's how it became a Mad Max movie instead of what it was originally intended to be. And this is where the dissatisfaction comes in for a lot of people. This kind of puts the brakes on what was a Mad Max world. But again, I still like seeing things that sort of exist in their own ecosystem, because that can happen when you have insular, isolated communities. And the mythology they have that goes on into the end. When you see, the heroine at the end is having her own children now, and she's passing on the stories, like, and they say like, and this is why we have the tell, and this is why we leave the lights on for the day that he will find his way home. I love that so much. The fairy tale continues.
Now,
I will add one small thing, and that is that the addition of the children and putting Mad Max in it also works as a character point for Mad Max as well, because he lost his family.
Yeah.
He clearly has a soft spot for children. He couldn't kill Blaster because he thought it was a child. So, having him in a position where he has to take care of all these children and he doesn't really want to is really interesting. And I think it makes him more of a human character.
Okay,
very much so.
Let's touch on that. And I'm going to go back to you, Steve. Did that ring true to you when he wasn't able to keep up his end of the deal with Anti-Entity because he didn't kill Blaster? Did that ring true to you or not?
Yeah, because he lost his own child, and I can completely understand that. He doesn't want to kill children. I think that's a humanizing element in an otherwise very hard character. Because at that point he just comes across as this really rough and tough dude. But what is his soft spot? The fact that he can't hurt a child, and I find that really interesting.
And when you look at the reveal of Blaster, and even though he's just gotten the crap kicked out of him, he's sitting there smiling kind of like goofily, like Sloth out of the Goonies, and Max is looking at him like he doesn't understand. He just thinks it's a game. He probably doesn't even understand what the concept of life and death mean.
Now, I will say I'm a hard bastard. So, I was like, man, if I was the one writing this, I would have been tempted, and with how far Max has gone, for Max to have just slammed the thing down and killed the guy. However, if he does that, he's no longer the hero. and we're not rooting for
Well,
him.
you got to remember the
So-
second film, Max gets his humanity back. So you got to
Yeah.
build off of that.
Mhm.
Even though this film is set 15 years after after Mad Max 2, which was 5 years beyond Mad Max.
So it's 20 years,
Mhm.
give or take, post-apocalypse. Yeah, so it's like I agree with you. It's like if I was writing it, depending on what kind of film, thing I was writing, I might.
Yeah, but you're a dark bastard.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
I think it makes him a compelling anti-hero. I mean,
Yeah.
you really want because he goes into some really dark places in this movie. He has to just to survive.
Yeah.
And he slams that poor girl in the face at one point. This is a guy with some really rough edges, but so you need that one saving grace. You need that one saving grace to keep him from completely crossing the line.
See, it was just this is my criticism of the film, and I'd love for you guys to tear my criticism apart. But there were several left turns in this film that felt way too sudden and way too extreme all of a sudden. So that was one where all of a sudden, the helmet comes off and it's like they don't kill Blaster. And then the second one was Master, the
dwarf.
little guy, the dwarf. He ends up turning into a good guy. So it was like and it seemed very sudden. It was like
Max saved the life of his kid. From my perspective, I think that's why he did it.
But he went from a guy that at the beginning of the film, when he was down there controlling Undertown or whatever that place was called, he was not very likable. Then suddenly it's like, oh, now we're supposed to identify with them.
Yeah, well, he had power, and power was a corrupting influence. And I would like to know his backstory too.
Yeah.
How he, as a very educated man by the looks of things, but he was also a dwarf, so he has had no physical power his entire life.
Yeah.
And then he befriends this giant goon, and all of a sudden he has very definitive power.
Yeah.
And because
he was brought low at one point, and I think that all that time of being brought low might have humbled him.
Yeah, and so like when he had to rely on others once again, it could just be his intelligence, but he understands. I got to play ball, and I've got to develop a new sort of relationship with these people because they are not the powerhouse that Blaster is.
Yeah, I will say the third part that was, if I had a criticism for the film as a whole is that the kids' world and Bartertown feel like they're in two separate movies. They are so many worlds apart, and they're physically separated by a desert. So it feels like it's just so disconnected that it feels like you're in different movies in the different locations.
And again, this is the problem. This movie was supposed to be that scenario, and then he has to work it in the Mad Max world. I still think it works because you do have this isolation. It's like going to Madagascar and seeing, even Australia itself has animals like nothing else in the world. There are only marsupials in Australia. Mm-hmm. So, George is obviously very aware that sort of isolation can produce very different results. But that's the thing that puts the brake on the movie for a lot of people. Like, okay, I'm in a Mad Max movie. Mad Max, this is great. Mad Max, what's he going to do? He's out in the desert. Like, oh, we've got polite Lord of the Flies all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I thought the kids were good. I thought the acting and everything by the kids was very, very good.
Yeah.
It's just
especially since child actors are often not that good.
I love some of the names. Like the name of the leader of the children is Slakem Thirst.
Yeah. Well, and even the mythology.
So I kind of get the feeling that he found water at some point, and that's how he achieved his right of manhood name.
and I want to get in. I've got one other character that I want to talk about, and then I want to get into like the character design and the filming and those aspects, because I think that's the strength of this film. But there is one other character that I really wanted to bring up, and I'm going to go to Steve first on this. I'm going to preface this by letting you know, Steve, that this guy was actually in Mad Max 2 as well. He was in
Bruce Spencer.
Yeah, Bruce Spencer. And in both movies, he plays a guy who is flying, but they're not the same character.
If Steve doesn't have the answer to this, I do. I know why this is.
But what did you think of the character and his kid? The the scavenger. What did you think of him? Because I think he's really interesting. I wish he had had more screen time. In fact, he's one of my favorite characters. But I wanted to see what you thought of him.
I thought he was going to be in this movie more than he was, to be honest. Because it's like, because when we first see him, I mean, he's doing like aerial passes, to get Max's stuff, because he's on a caravan with camels, and whodunit would approve probably. But I was thinking whodunit when I saw that. But yeah,
camels are the way to go.
Yeah,
highly underrated as a mount. You don't understand. Highly underrated.
Yes, yeah, but Bruce Spence was really good in this, and he looked. He has this kind of wild-eyed look, which I find really interesting. But at the same time, he's a father and he has this kid, so clearly he's sort of doing this, just in order to survive and take care of his child, which I find interesting. And then later on, we see that Max and his gang, end up finding them much later, and it's like, yeah, if you can you basically come with me if you want to live, and I just thought that whole moment was like, yeah, okay, because he knows he's pretty much dead. It's your lucky day, because he knows he's pretty much dead if he doesn't cooperate one way or another. So and at that point he kind of becomes like a fun side character along the way. But yeah, I wish we had known more about him. I wish we'd known more about how he has a working plane. Whether he was a professional pilot who survived the apocalypse and he had this plane somehow. I would have liked to know all that, because I feel like there's a lot more to this character than we were being shown. And yet there are just so many little backstory elements to him that are apparent just with what we see that I would have liked to see built on, but the movie is focusing on where it's going and not on this character.
I love the little kid as his son as well.
The kid is brilliant.
Where he's like, "Dead bait, we're dead bait," right away.
I love that he's dressed. I love how he's dressed for safari. Like he's got the safari helmet,
the pit helmet on,
the gun. And I just thought that was awesome.
Just blocking the whole train. Nobody move! This is a stick up.
Yeah. So I think they're fantastic, and it's interesting too because there was a kid in the second movie. So to Jeff, what did you think of Bruce Spence and his son?
Okay, now these films made me a huge fan of Bruce Spence. And if you haven't seen the I can't remember the name of the series now. Oh well. He played my favorite wizard of all time just because of his crazy name and how he played it. Zedekiah Zul Zorander.
He's been in a ton of stuff. He's
one of those character actors who keeps popping up in thing after thing. He was in he had a part in the movie Gods of Egypt as the Sphinx. Like you hear that voice right away, and then you can sort of say like, oh, the CGI is based off of his face and things like that. So he's always super interesting to me whenever I see him in a film.
Well, he's just Revenge of the Sith. He's been in just a bunch of stuff.
Oh yeah, he was the same race as the Grand Inquisitor. Lots of things. So he's really magnetic sort of personality. So for this film, in the Mad Max 2, he was the gyro pilot, and he also had a gyrocopter, and that was his thing. He is a airborne raider. And in this movie, they also wanted somebody to still have a working plane of some sort, and they couldn't find anybody. I don't know if it's a problem just finding a pilot or finding, getting the right casting, what was going on. But it got so late in the production, so much of the film was shot, and they needed to shoot these scenes. They said, we want somebody to be like Bruce. Screw it, let's just go get Bruce. And so even Bruce himself said, he is and isn't the character because he's kind of playing a reflection of that character. Yeah. Now, if you have a headcanon like me, you can go one of two ways. We see that the gyro pirate leaves, and he's got this gal he's into at the end of Mad Max 2. Maybe they had a kid together. Maybe their settlement got destroyed, and so it's just him and his son, and he went back to his pirating ways. Or the gyro pirate has a twin brother out there who has a similar modus operandi. Either one of those are fun, and I like them for my headcanon. And I'm glad he made it into the film because even his brief time in the film, he's fun. And that's why you don't see very much of him in the film. Yeah. I would like to bring up one other character for those like the MC part is really small, so we don't. There's not much story behind that other than this guy is really cool as a functionary in Anti-Entity's court. But one of my favorite characters in the film has no lines at all, and that is Iron Bar, played by the comedian Angry Anderson.
Yep.
Who is known
Yeah, it's the coolest name.
It's like Steve was saying in the pre-show. The name is so cool they should have just called the character Angry Anderson. And that would have been such a funny nod. Like this comedian survived the apocalypse, and now he's a badass. And he is a badass, and he takes damage like John Wick and keeps coming. And it's great because he's short, and so he's got this like a kabuki mask on this iron bar, which is at the height of most people around him. So this mask is always looking you in the face while he's having to look up to you. And I just love this character so much. And that's another character I'd like to hear the backstory of. And in my own headcanon, it's pretty apparent he dies at the end, but at the same time, I kind of want to think that, you get to an end credits and you see him like slowly crawling out of the wreckage and dusting off his porcelain mask and putting it back in its holster, because this guy should survive like the cockroaches. He's just that awesome to me.
he is really good. And I'm going to go to Steve for his reaction about that.
I mean, who else does a hot pursuit on one of those train cars that you have to push? Well, and he's miles down the track before the cars catch up to him.
So one thing I noticed that I never noticed until I rewatched the movie this week for filming this is that I don't know if this was an homage later on in the Austin Powers films, but he does the Mini-Me thing where as he's dying, he flips the bird and then dies.
Yes,
yes. Oh my God, it's Mini-Me. So, what did you think of Iron Bar, Steve?
He was really great, and like I said, I think that name is amazing. But I really did like how he kept being portrayed, and kind of like all these scenes, in the action scenes later. He's just a really great opponent for Max, and he has those really cool moments. Let's just flip him the bird at the end of the movie.
Because the thing that when you look at this character, you like. He's not like one of these guys who's like a super martial artist. He's not a giant buff dude like Schwarzenegger. This guy survives in the apocalypse on pure grit and determination. Yeah. He will not quit.
I love
that. And that's one of the things I do like about a lot of these characters in this series is they kind of show you the different kinds of people that survive and what it took for them to survive. Because you just see, these characters, like if it's either grit or it's charisma, or it's just with Mad Max
like Master Blaster,
making alliances, or Max just being really cunning, because he's really like a step ahead a lot of the time. So you see all these kinds of different ways that people survive, and I think that with this one character, it's just like I'm not gonna die. Yeah, I'm too tough and I'm too angry to die.
I mean, a perfect example is like when Max gets his interview and like she gives him a death battle as an interview. And he's divested all these weapons on the table, a scene that they'll recreate in the Pirates movie years later with Disney. And he's carried in his fly swatter. And Iron Bar is actually going to take him down. And then you find out he's got a hidden knife inside of his fly swatter. That was amazing.
Max does a lot of really clever stuff. I mean, the whole thing with, I got all these weapons here. Because it's kind of like the man that episode of The Mandalorian, or no, it was the Book of Boba Fett, where it's like, do you want to declare your weapons? And it's like, how many days you got? Because here's my Darksaber, here's all this. Max is like that, and I dig it.
I will also say, on a more serious note, this character puts Anti-Entity in a different light, because this is the character who is the true mustache twirling villain of the film. He not only will do anything violent, he enjoys doing the violent thing. In fact, that's his first inclination. And so it makes Anti-Entity's pragmatism look positively benevolent at times. Like when she saved Master Blaster from being eaten by, or Master from being eaten by the pigs. So
it's like we talked about the practicality of this character, and she saw, okay, this guy is a tool. Where is he best suited to be used?
Yeah, exactly.
I can't have him die because we need power.
Yeah.
So
you got to have your muscle.
Yeah.
We just can't have him taking over and leveraging that.
Yeah. It's just interesting that the pragmatic character who's willing to murder is the good cop, and then you have this, this angry. I'm not going to call him, All right, I'm going to go non-PC. The angry midget is the bad cop, So it's like good Lord. But it's great. It works. It really works. So, I mean, that is a part of the film that I think really works well. So I'm going to go to Steve first. Let's go around the horn. I want to talk about, the technical aspects of filmmaking on this. And you can go anywhere you want on it, but because there are a lot of places to go. But, specifically, we can look at filming because there are some beautiful shots and beautiful on-location filming that took place here. You could look at set design, another great part of this film. We could look at props, that work. You can also look at stunt work because there are some really good stunts in this film. You
can always count on that in a Mad Max movie.
Yeah, like we were saying, it out of all of the Mad Max films, it's probably got the least action in it, but it's not like there's no action in it. So talk a little bit about what stood out for you for that, and then I'll go to Jeff, and then I'll wrap that segment up. So what did you think, Steve?
Well, I would start off with a lot of the set design. I really like the look of Bartertown. You get a definite Western town sense of that whole place. But at the same time, it does have that post-apocalyptic grit behind it. You can tell that it's lived in. It's that kind of science fiction.
Didn't it almost feel like a Firefly town?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. So it's like that. It's a very space Western type of place. And I dig that. I think that really works for Mad Max, especially when you're talking about the desert. When you're talking about a desert town and all of that, I think that combining those two flavors really works. I love the.
You know what else the town reminds me of?
What's that?
Deadwood.
Yeah.
Very much that same sort of feel.
Yeah. I would say probably more Colorado or West Texas than South Dakota, but yeah.
I was just thinking about like the series Deadwood, like
the series. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, because you've got it is that sort of barter town where like people are trading goods and services, but you've always got to watch out for the knife in your back.
Yeah, very much so. And I thought that was really well designed. I thought the Thunderdome looked really good. It had that erector set kind of flavor, with the way that it was designed. It looks shabby. But yet it kind of holds together, and I like that. I like the wire work that they did with all of the jumps and things like that in the Thunderdome. The way that they did those kinds of stunts, the way Max leaping out of the way of the spear, I think. Those kinds of moves, I thought really worked.
Stabbed on the dome.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great.
all that kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff really worked. I like the way that they put together like the vehicles. These are things that really look like they were put together and are practical. Rather than the kind of thing you would see that thing now probably done on CGI, and it wouldn't look nearly as good as you see with some of these, which are really working. Sort of cars and trains and things like this, and you see, and they're actually moving. I mean, they're actually moving like that. And I thought that was just really well done. And Miller's always been very good at his car chases. Let's face it.
Yeah, like even in Fury Road, he's keeping as much of that practical as he can.
Yeah,
I've got some stuff to say on that when it gets to me, because it is a part I love. And I think there's a good part, bad part of what has come in the later films. But let's get to Jeff. What is?
Yeah, I might have a different reaction if I had seen the first two.
Yeah. No. It definitely builds on the second.
Hey, look, there are stunts in the second movie that I have no concept of how the stunt guys live through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like Steve, you'll see like when you go watch the film, there's one stunt in particular where a guy on a motorcycle smacks an object, and he goes tumbling through the air, like on camera. He's flying at least 20 feet through the air. And I'm like, is there like some sort of circus net over here to catch him? What's going on? Because I don't know how that guy lives. Yeah. And it's all in camera, and you can see it's a real person. It's like, holy crap, man. Yeah, it's Australia. We'll just bury him in the desert. Nobody will know.
That's the other thing, too. It looks like real Australia. Like when they go to a lot of these different places, it looks like it was filmed in Australia in real places there.
It was filmed in Australia, and that's part of what I'm going to bring up in a minute. But
even though this was the first of the movies that was American financed.
Yep. I'll go back to Jeff in a second, but one of the things I'll say to you, Steve, is you owe it to yourself to go see the second one, because you'll see a lot of the concepts that get carried into this, and then they built on it, and then it goes into Fury Road. But even at one point, the gyrocopter crashes. They actually crashed that gyrocopter. So, I mean, they actually did these things in the second film. So, like, to Jeff's point, it's like, how in the hell did anybody survive this movie? But going over to you, Jeff.
I mean, you'll find, Steve, the brilliance of these movies is you can watch them in any order, and it doesn't actually spoil the experience because each one is still a self-contained story.
Right. It's episodic.
So, to address an earlier point real quick, there was a sequence that apparently got lost. It hit the cutting room floor, and apparently they don't have the film, the negative anymore. But there was supposed to be a moment where Max was having a nightmare about his wife and child being run over. And I think he was supposed to be one of the people driving the motorcycle. So he felt like he had kind of become what he had dreaded before, what he used to hunt before as a police officer.
It's the closing point I want to get to, but just to address what you were saying, one of the things we were talking about with 4 was that Mad Max is not the central character. If you think about all of them, he's not the central character in quite a few of them. He's almost like the protagonist that makes the story go, but the most important people are everybody around him. And that's so weird, but it's true in these films.
It still works. And like, because of that, it makes me interested because we do get hints, and George actually included some of these delusion/dream sequences in Fury Road. We see like glimpses of Max's past that we've never seen. The Aboriginal with blood on his hands, the young child looking at him accusingly, stuff like that. It's like, ooh, Max, what did you do? What happened? So, but to get into this, the production design is brilliant. Mad Max has definitely iconically decided what post-apocalypse looks like. It is the standard by all post-apocalypse. I've seen a million films in the 80s try and achieve a similar look on a budget similar to what the first Mad Max used, and not be able to pull it off.
There's no Fallout game series without Mad Max. So.
Absolutely not. And like to Steve's point, like it's also believable. Bartertown looks like it was bound together by scrap. It looks like a shanty town, but it looks like a shanty town that works. It kind of reminds me like when they did Mad Max on the water world. It had a similar sort of feel. It looked like this is what people would have to use to try and make their way in this apocalyptic setting. Yeah. And so you believe it, and I even like the oasis, like out in the middle of the desert, you find an oasis. Like I thought that this wonderful little bowl of paradise that I know is doomed because of how genetics work. And then the great set of the tail fin of that airplane being stuck in the sand out there. What a Planet of the Apes kind of moment there. I love that so much.
Yeah.
And that giant prop that these kids are all standing on and whatnot. And so the world building is so good. The costuming is so good. Using things that are, just like, worn away tires, and using those as pauldrons and things like that. That's become another post-apocalypse sort of standard when you see movies like this. Oil is precious, and what little you don't have, then they've had to figure out, like, okay, we'll farm pigs, we'll make fuel out of other things. We'll make our own natural gas via methane. This whole thing works because eventually you just run out of gunpowder or bullets, or people who know how to make bullets, and a lot of people have to rely on hand to hand, and so that changes the dynamic of the world. And it's like just so many of these movies we've seen where we don't have our level of technology. If you look at things like Escape from New York, or what was that one we did with Ray Liotta when he died, where he's on the prison island, seeing how No Escape. When it becomes Lord of the Flies, we've all got to get creative, because we have to come together somehow, some way, even if it takes a Negan to do it, if we are going to survive. And then with what's left of the world, you've got to make do with what you've got. And it looks so believable. And the looks of all the battle buggies with all the chicken wire and sheet metal welded or bolted onto them, I love that imagery so much. It's just such an iconic world, and it's all because George Miller, he and his producer, who unfortunately died before this movie got started, which is another reason why this movie takes such a weird turn.
He died location scouting in a helicopter.
He died location scouting in a helicopter crash, and Miller really just directed the action sequences, but his heart wasn't into this movie, which is another reason why this film feels so tonally different.
Yeah.
But he soldiered on and made it happen, and good for him on that. But he clearly loves this world, even if he doesn't visit it for like a decade and a half at a time. It's still very consistent from film to film. It's like when George Lucas does a Star Wars, it doesn't matter if he does a Star Wars 30 years later, it's still going to look like Star Wars because the guy who envisioned it is working on it.
Absolutely. Now,
oh, and kudos for him for having the balls to kill some children.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
You could not get away with that today.
Yeah. Now, I will say, and how impactful was that scene? Because it set the stakes.
It did. These children have been living in this paradise. Everything is great. They've got food and water, and he tries to tell them, like, don't go out in that desert. And they go out in the desert, and they lose a few of them in the sinkholes. Yeah. It's like,
and what's it tell you? Just like in Fury Road, where they didn't need to tear down Max to build up Furiosa, they didn't need to make the kids all knowing, plucky, all conquerors to show that they still had skills.
I mean, today, that lead girl would have been a girl boss, totally been a girl boss, and she'd have been telling Max how to do it.
Yeah, so
if it's done by anybody other than George Miller, that is.
I want to talk a lot about location, and this is going to hit back on some of the stuff both of you were talking about. Before I do that, though, I do want to give a shout out to costume design in this film as well, which is fantastic. The different looks that they created for the different characters are all unique. The children's makeup design, some of them, is fantastic. I mean, this film, if you look at it, should have won some Academy Awards, I think, for costume design, at least. Yeah. If not set design. Because
set design, costume design, art design, it's so good. Yeah. He even had the balls to put in the children's area, a pregnant girl. You see a pregnant girl in there. So, the kids have figured out that whole thing as well.
Yeah. Which also raises stakes again, because you're like, these kids are breeding, you know? So it's like, holy crap, now getting to locations. One of the things I love about the first three Mad Max movies, well, all the Mad Max movies, is that they're kind of like love letters to Australia, sense of, that crazy Australian spirit. And that's a shout out to Dodgy. We love you, but you're Australian. You all are crazy down there, in a good way.
Hey, nah.
Yeah. And the first three movies were made in Australia. And they were Australian productions. Everything was practical. They didn't have a whole lot of money, and you could tell, but they spent their money wisely. Yeah. All of those buggies and everything are pure Australian ingenuity, the kind of stuff that you would find out in the bush. And they built these things, and they raced them around for real. And that's why it looks so crazy when they're out there. And this film was filmed out in like 200 miles north of Adelaide, out in the middle of the red center of Australia in the desert. It's got that look and everything. And they're out there going nuts and doing their stuff and everything. And it is one of the things that I would take away from Fury Road, is that Fury Road is the first Mad Max movie that wasn't filmed in Australia. And the reason is because in the intervening years, Australia had passed a lot of laws about how, for safety, and you can't go out there and tear up the desert with all these buggies and everything. And the director, the producer, wanted to keep that practical effect. And so that's one of the reasons people love Fury Road, is that a lot of that stuff was practical. And so they ended up filming it in Namibia. Where
the first film, George Miller wrecked one of his own vehicles.
Yeah.
He sacrificed his own vehicle, and he paid another guy a lot of beer to use one of his vehicles for the film.
So, and it's funny because, to their credit, for Fury Road, when they needed to do some reshoots on locations and they weren't doing all the stunts and everything, it was just reshoots for filming and everything, they actually did go back to Australia to do the reshoots there.
Oh, so nice.
It kept those Australian roots. but it's like I think that speaks about how, you know, it's great that we want to protect people and everything, but Fury Road is another one of those Mad Max movies where it looks like somebody should have died, but they did it. They knew what they were doing. There's ways to do this stuff practically, and do it well while keeping people safe. You know, it seems like sometimes we've gone too far the other way. And another reason was cost. For whatever reason, you know, it's gotten prohibitively expensive to produce movies, and
well,
you know,
it's disappointing. I mean, like as far as like stunts and production go, like George Miller, he hired these Cirque du Soleil level circus performers to be the people on the poles, the war boys on the poles, who are leaning over. And I thought for sure that was going to be CGI, but no, those are people strapped to poles or strapped to cars that are driving through the desert, and they're, you know, they're real professionals. They know what they're doing as they're leaning over trying to pluck people off of other vehicles. And I think about you know, a release from Marvel not too long back. They're getting ready to start up Daredevil for Disney Plus, and they're talking about CGIing Daredevil's fight scenes. It's like, why? Charlie Cox did such an amazing job. He and the other performers and the stunt guys who double for him and double for other people. Why would you want to CGI something when I've already seen how good it can be in real life? I don't want to see CGI clone of Keanu Reeves and John Wick. We've already seen that there was a disconnect when they did The Matrix and they did CGI Keanu for the big burly fight. I know the technology's gotten better, but at the same time, your brain goes like, I still don't buy into that.
Yeah.
You know, if Lance was here, you'd be on about that. So, like, you know, CGI is a tool. Use it appropriately.
Well, and speaking of Lance, I've got to channel Lance, and I want your guys' feedback on this and what you thought of the look of the film. But I will say, once again, this film is shot on film, you know, so I'm channeling Lance. But you look at it, the film is beautiful to look at.
Yes.
There are some moments out in the desert, vistas and stuff, but even Bartertown and the Oasis, you know, the Billabong that they're in, those are, the shots are absolutely beautiful. And some of the visuals you get, I mean, the color is just amazing in the film.
And that's one of the things that has been lost. And I'll go back to The Hateful Eight, whether you like Quentin Tarantino or not, because he did bring this back with that film. Because we've gotten into a period where everybody wants to do color correction. I think color correction is kind of a funny way of putting it, because Lance would agree, if you shoot a film right with the right film with the right lenses, you get amazing color. So now what it is you are not correcting color. You are doing color overlay. You are creating color for mood. And we have this whole thing has been like named like bisexual lighting these days, or like where you have the contrast between the turquoise and the orange, because it clicks something in the brain. You get a particular emotional response out of that. It's so contrasty, but not so harsh that it, you know, it's not like putting red and green together where you're like, okay, this is only cool at Christmas. But that's become such a thing in film. Like, you know, they do that sort of thing. And like, in spite of the fact that I like Zack Snyder, I didn't think Man of Steel needed to be so dour looking with the shades of blue. When, you know, you want Superman to be like, oh, this S stands for hope. It was like, well, your film doesn't look too hopeful, man. It looks pretty grim and gritty. That feels more like a Batman movie. And yet, so, yeah, guys, shoot some things in some color. And
the dog is upset.
Yeah, if the dog hates it. The dog absolutely hates it. You know, if I was going to do some color correcting, I would probably use it to bring some saturation up and get a little bit more color out if I'm shooting digital. And when you look at some of these old films, and the beautiful, vibrant color that comes through. And I just would I would appreciate if more and more directors and cinematographers would, you know, not just think about what's going on now, but look at what people used to do, build on the entire history of cinema, and take from that.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to go to Steve for his thoughts in a second. But I think another part of the problem is that everybody is so used to video games now that they want their movies to look like a video game, and it makes it feel artificial, you know.
It's so weird you said, because of the period I grew up in, and unlike Lance, I'm shooting on digital because it was cheaper, it was quicker. You know, for me, it worked in a lot of different ways, but I would actually go in and put some some grain in my film. I would frame up my shots in a certain format because I wanted it to look like film, even if it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's very appealing because a lot of us have just grown up our entire lives that, and now we've got a generation who's grown up with something entirely different. So for them, that's the aesthetic they want.
Yep. See, what did you think of the look of the film? Is there anything that really stood out for you?
Actually, yeah, I think all the locations look great. I think there's definitely the right mood. I think filming natural locations in the outback, even the desert looks really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like all of the locations that you think would be absolutely boring. No, there actually is variety, and visual interest and color in the desert. So all that works. It is well shot. I mean, shooting it on film, I think clearly works. Yeah, as far as the whole thing with video games and then wanting movies to be video games, I think this is part of the problem also with video games is that they want everything to be so photorealistic as to seem rich, and they want movies to be the same way. But they still have not really captured the world in the same way that a lot of these old films did, and particularly films like this that had to be done practically. Because this is kind of what they made work. And sometimes less is more. And I think Miller understood that and still does. And a lot of people today really don't. So they're trying to simulate reality with technology when, reality is always going to be, actual reality is going to be better. You just want to use the CG to fill in the gaps that you can't do any other way. You want to minimize the level of CG so that the reality takes front and center. And I feel like that's what this film had, and a lot of modern films don't.
It's interesting. The movie that we were supposed to do this week that has been put on the back burner was Hidalgo. Also, lots of desert scenes shot on film. Absolutely beautiful. And then recently, I rewatched Lawrence of Arabia, all in the desert.
The trick, Walter, is not minding that it hurts.
Yeah.
Fun fact. There is a tie-in between this film and that one. George did not get his usual Australian composer for this film. I don't know if that was a studio decision or not, but the composer for Lawrence of Arabia composed the movie music for this film. And I think it works out really nice because it does feel more desolate. It matches the story perfectly.
Mm-hmm. I love Lawrence of Arabia. But man, that movie is long. Oof, Jesus. So, all right, cool. Well, this was a great discussion. I hope Lance is being safe. So
keep sending those beautiful pictures, brother.
Next week, we will pick up with another film. I'm not sure if we're going to go back to Hidalgo or we may have a film chosen by one of our other Crusaders. We will decide offline, but make sure you join us next week. Real quick before we go, I'm going to go around the horn and have everybody rate this film. And I'm going to start with Steve. Steve, what would you rate this film out of 10?
Oh, yeah. Putting some thought into it. I mean, yeah, it's not as good as other Mad Max films, but it's also really good for what it does do. I think visually it hits the right notes. I think the car chases are great. I think the set design is really good. Tina Turner is amazing. But at the same time, I mean, there are those sort of issues, compared to the series. I don't know. I kind of feel like 8.2 is probably my first thought, but I mean, that's just kind of like a first impression.
Okay, cool. Jeff, what about you?
I think I was going to rate it a 7.5, but after talking about it again, I think I'm going to step it up to an 8, just because we have some of the most interesting characters in the film series. They're all very layered. When we find out, how layered Anti-Entity is, we found out how complex Master Blaster is. He's got a backstory. And I love discovering characters, even if we don't get to see their story. I love discovering characters that have all this story. And this film is not an 80-minute car chase, as a lot of Mad Max films are. This is a movie that is packed with so much story and character and that world building. So I'm going to go with a solid 8.
Okay. I'm going to go a little bit lower, and I'll explain. I'm going to give it a 7, which is not a bad score.
Heretic.
I'm going to take a point away for some continuity problems between the different locations. I'm going to take a point away, a couple points for just little problems here and there. I think I could have gone as high as 7.5, but I'm going to be the bad guy here. So I'm going to be the angry Anderson of the Cinema Crusaders today and give it a 7. I was genuinely surprised that on IMDb this film is only rated as 6.7 though, which feels really, really low. So
Yeah,
I don't
definitely.
understand that one, but there it is. So I want to thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to really introduce me properly once again to the Mad Max series. I'm definitely looking forward to trying the other films when I get some time. So
yeah, you should definitely try it out. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Always a pleasure, man. Love talking about these movies, and especially because we do all these older films. So many of these movies I've seen, it's always a good time to go back and enjoy them once again, and try and suss out all the little details and like, oh wow, I'd forgotten about that, or I've discovered something new in the process.
Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't watched Beyond Thunderdome in a while, so it was fun to go back and watch it again and check it out. So we will be back again next Friday with another film. Until then, all of you, keep enjoying cinema, keep your popcorn popped and the butter warm, and don't use too much salt. Or if you do, make sure you drink lots of water. So anyway, till next time, everybody have fun. We are the Cinema Crusaders, and we're out of here. See ya.